The Locked On Podcast Network presents the NFL Big 3 in 30. The three biggest stories in the NFL from our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The NFL Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest story in the NFL.
Kevin Stefanski may not even have to make a decision on who his starting quarterback will be week one, because it looks like it's going to be made for him.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast.
Yes, Shedeur Sanders did essentially sit out practice on Wednesday after sustaining an oblique injury early on in practice. It was a very weird situation, similar to a couple weeks ago when Shedeur didn't practice. And I guess we all should have just assumed he must be hurt because he was throwing during individual stuff, during one-on-one drills with receivers and defensive backs. And then all of a sudden, you got to the first team setting. It was 7-on-7s. It was Kenny Pickett going first. It was Tyler Huntley after him. And then the first 11-on-11s, and it was Joe Flacco. It was Dylan Gabriel, and then it was Tyler Huntley. And we were all sitting there like, where's Shedeur Sanders? And so that basically played out throughout the rest of practice, where Flacco took the majority of the reps with the first team. Dylan Gabriel sprinkled in a little bit with the first team, but took most of his reps with the 2s and the 3s during various 11-on-11 drills against the Eagles defense. And then we got to the end of practice, and Shedeur Sanders hadn't taken a snap during team drills the entire time. We came to find out it was an oblique injury for Shedeur, and as a precaution, they held him out. And so essentially, at this point, the only quarterback who hasn't been hurt during training camp is Joe Flacco. And so it's starting to look more and more like Kevin Stefanski isn't going to have much of a decision to make when it comes to this quarterback situation and this quarterback competition, because Kenny Pickett looks like very much a non-factor right now. And if his goal is to have a quarterback picked by next week, when it's the third preseason game, sort of your final dress rehearsal, if you will, to get you ready for the regular season, he's going to play a lot. You're going to see the ones largely play in that final preseason game against the Rams. And so if that's the goal, Flacco's the only one who really seems like he's in line to do that, whereas Kenny Pickett obviously hasn't been able to do much of anything since the hamstring injury that he suffered. And then Dylan Gabriel's been doing with the hamstring, and they sort of tried to slowly ramp him back up. He got thrown a little bit more today because, again, out of necessity, they wanted to get him out there and get him playing more. And it looked for a while like they were just trying to catch him up for the limited reps that he had missed, I guess, in the last couple practices that they had, and obviously not playing in the game on Friday last week. And so that was initially what I kind of thought until we got the update that Shedeur Sanders had been hurt. And there's always the possibility that this isn't a serious oblique injury, and maybe Shedeur Sanders can get out there sooner rather than later. But I usually these things take some time. And so it sort of sets the stage for the quarterback situation to solve itself. And Flacco is going to be your week one starter, even though I think we all sort of saw that coming. We were reading the tea leaves on that to begin with. But I think now it just kind of becomes even more evident because it's the only choice that really makes any sense. He's the only quarterback who's really been healthy throughout the entirety of camp to this point. I also think what this also does, and Stefanski wouldn't necessarily get into quite yet what his plans are for Saturday's game against the Eagles, but he did mention that obviously if Kenny Pickett and Dylan Gabriel can't go, that Shedeur Sanders, this was before practice, that Shedeur Sanders would be the starter. Well, now it looks like Shedeur Sanders isn't going to really be part of the conversation potentially for Saturday's game at all. And so that means if Pickett's not as well, now all of a sudden Dylan Gabriel gets sort of thrust into the position where he's going to be your starter, and then Tyler Huntley takes over at some point. So it's kind of the opposite of the reverse of last week, where you just take the other rookie quarterback. Shedeur got his start last week, then it went to Tyler Huntley. Now it's the other rookie quarterback, and Gabriel goes to Tyler Huntley. That's what it certainly looks like is going to be the setup on Saturday. That's assuming that Dylan Gabriel gets through practice tomorrow, and he's totally okay because they are still sort of monitoring that hamstring injury and making sure that they're not doing anything. They're not putting too much stress on him or on it before he really gets a chance to, go out and potentially play on Saturday. And what I thought was interesting was that Stefanski actually admitted that his plan all along was to play each rookie in those first two preseason games, the goal was always going to sort of be to split them between the two rookies. Like Shedeur's going to get one, Dillon's going to get one, and that was kind of the thought process there. And so now he's kind of had that sort itself out for him as well, where just based on necessity they had to go with Shedeur last week, and based on necessity this week it looks like they're going to have to go with Dillon. And so it is just kind of what it is, and we'll see how that kind of works and plays itself out. And tomorrow with the joint practice, and then leading into the weekend. But a lot of things that are sort of just becoming obvious, and without Kevin Stefanski even really having to lift a finger to a degree and have to like really make any hard decisions on the position specifically. It's funny how these things sometimes work out this way. But it's another injury that sort of derails whatever the plan was going to be for this quarterback competition. And frankly, it's disappointing because it seems like by the time we get through that game on Saturday, we'll have a game of Shedeur Sanders to go off of and a game of Dillon Gabriel to go off of. But you won't have a game where they both sort of played and showed you different things and sort of competed with each other in that setting of a preseason game together. And it also takes Shedeur Sanders out of an opportunity to go out and build upon what he showed last week in the preseason, which was a very, very good start. I talked about it on the podcast. Like a lot of stuff that we all thought were signs of a guy trending in the right direction, fixing some things that the team's obviously been emphasizing with him and working on, and that he's getting better. And he looks like an NFL quarterback. And there was reason for so much excitement over the weekend and leading into this week because of how he played. Like maybe he can be the guy. And I understand where all that comes from. Now you're going to get a chance to see what Dillon can do. And we'll compare those games. But it would have been nice to also see Shedeur take another step, right? And get even more reps out there and see if he could improve upon even more things that he was trying to work on this week after that performance. Which, by the way, he wants to do. Because even he said like he left some things on the table last week on Friday that he wanted back. And so this was going to be his chance to sort of do that in another preseason game. And now that kind of is likely off the table for him. We'll see what the situation brings tomorrow. We'll see if Sanders' injury is more serious, if it's something that's going to keep him out for Saturday. I'm sort of anticipating that right now. But I think it's kind of twofold here. That's Stefanski's decision for Saturday, much like last week's quarterback situation. Everyone was freaking out about, are they setting Shedeur up for failure last week? And it was like, guys, they don't have a lot of other quarterbacks right now. They weren't going to play Joe Flacco. Shedeur was the only other healthy quarterback, and so they had to bring Tyler Huntley in to sort of help the situation as well to get through the preseason. And so the same thing kind of applies this week, where now it's the other rookie who's likely going to get a shot. But then also, it is abundantly clear at this point, if it wasn't already just based off the rep share, that Joe Flacco is more than likely going to be the starting quarterback, barring something crazy week one of the season, because he's taken the majority of those reps. He's kind of tuning himself up into getting ready for the regular season. Kenny Pickett's a non-factor right now. He's still limited and only participating in 7-on-7s. And so it's unfortunate that it sort of sorted itself out this way and that injuries had to play a role in it. But Flacco sort of by default is your starting quarterback. And so I think that sort of became more clear today with the news on Shedeur Sanders. And we'll see what Thursday brings in terms of a joint practice, if there's any updates on those guys.
Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year.
The intensity ratcheted up on day 2 of Falcons-Titans joint practices, but did it go too far?
You are Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast.
Of course, we are back with an illustrious guest. She is Maria Martin, sport anchor at 11 Alive, and she's here with us to talk about day 2 of the Falcons joint practices. She got her refereeing on today with all the fights going on in practice. But Maria, basically I got to ask you, was the story of day 2 of joint practices between the Falcons and the Titans, was it more about the fights or was it more about football?
I mean, look, it was about the fights. That's what everybody was so fired up about, right? And you see everyone reporting about it on Twitter. And granted, that is, or X, I guess is what it's called now. That is, it's the period of practice where we're not allowed to take our phones out in video. So you're going to have to take our word for it. But there were so many fights happening today. And you knew that that was going to happen. The first day of joint practices with any team, it's usually a little cool, calm, and collected. Remember, the Titans have been on like a worldwide tour. They were in Tampa with their joint practices. Then they had their preseason game there. They have not been home in 2 weeks. And so, yeah, sluggish start for the first joint practice with the Falcons, expected, whatever. And the Falcons definitely won the day in terms of football on that first day. Second day, Tides turned quite a bit, and it wasn't even hot outside. It wasn't like there were, tempers flaring because the temperature, I think it was just the competition heating up, literally and figuratively. And you saw that on the football field. I thought it was very encouraging. Just you're seeing more signs about this team coming together in a way that we kind of haven't seen in the past, or at least in recent memory for the Falcons. So yeah, all the focus and attention was certainly on the fights. And of course, when you see a quarterback in there, it's not every day you get that. Your starting quarterback is going toe for toe in a fight and sticking up for some guys. It's feisty. I love it. Everybody knows football is my favorite sport. Hockey is my second favorite. And so the blend of two worlds today was lovely.
Okay. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So when you mentioned Michael Penix, and for those folks that did not hear, Maria, you can give us more details and a full recap. But from what I understand, there was one sort of huge fight
Sure.
That drew all sides. And it seemed like that one was instigated, maybe not by Michael Penix, but because Michael Penix was at the heart of that one, with maybe some trash talking back and forth after he made a big completion to Ray McLeod, and Titans players didn't like it. And he was maybe, and so he was at the heart of that fight. And that basically caused like the benches to clear and everybody to sort of get in the midst of that. So I'm curious, give us the blow by blow of what you saw, as well as what are your thoughts seeing the quarterback of all people in the heart of these fights.
Yeah, so I'm not going to throw Michael Penix Jr. under the bus. It wasn't just him out there fighting. I'll go blow for blow and tell you exactly what happened with him on the field, because that's what everyone is chomping at the bit to hear, right? But special teams, there were fights over there. There were fights on both of the fields. So it wasn't just, there's this brawl happening here and nothing. No, it was all out everywhere. And if you talk to the players, they have to ask you, hey, what happened on that field? Because they're hearing of fights on the opposite field. Like, it was a lot going on today. But the main event, everyone, if you want to go on the fighting aspect of things, right, was Michael Penix Jr. And he said it was an alter ego for him. He doesn't know who that person was. He doesn't really even know what happened. And I actually believe that, when your adrenaline is pumping and in those instances, especially in sports, you just kind of black out and nothing really comes to mind. And that's kind of what happened to Mike. That's how heated the moment was. It was a deep ball to Ray, a big completion. And on Mike's account, there was a lot of chatter happening all throughout the practice leading up to that point. So I would assume that he said some things in return because he had heard them all afternoon, and he even said they said some words. So I shared mine, and I don't know what he said. He doesn't know what he said because he just kind of blacked that out of his memory. One thing leads to another. I'm sure someone goes chest for chest with Mike, and some things happen. So I didn't see the initial scuffle because it was quick. And as you mentioned, sidelines are clearing, benches are clearing, and everybody's coming to the middle. And next thing I see is Mike Penix on the ground. And so, of course, your teammates, when you see your prized possession, and in the NFL, it is a lot of money on the line when you got a starting quarterback on the ground. That's scary. And the whole point of these joint practices, especially for Mike, who doesn't play in preseason games, these quarterbacks aren't live, so they can't get hit. DJ Williams, the quarterback's coach for the Falcons, even said his first hit in training camp on Mike Penix Jr. Look, and he's a competitor. You know, the guy played running back when he was in Little League. He likes to put his nose in there, but unfortunately in the NFL, you got to protect your assets at all costs. So I know that made probably coaches, and Terry Fontenot was even in there. And that's when, you know, things are getting a little rough whenever you see your general manager running to the middle of the field and trying to break something like that up. So it was a rare occurrence. I don't know that I'll ever see anything like it again. And he even told me when I asked him, you know, have you ever been a part of something like this before? Mike, you're so calm. You're never really one to instigate. You don't really seem like the trash talker that, say, a Drake London would be, who you could not contain after this happened, by the way. He was just chirp, 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 chirping the whole rest of the practice. And rightfully so. You're sticking up for your quarterback. It was nice to see. But he said, no, honestly, he can't remember a time that he's ever been a part of something like that. So I don't think you're ever going to get it again. It was a one-time event. I firmly believe that. And, you know, Mike said he wishes that it wouldn't have gotten to that point. But at that point, words are exchanged. You got to stick up for yourself. And yeah, it was, to me, once in a lifetime when it comes to this specific player.
Now, where do you take that? Because again, it's not normal for your quarterback to be involved in this, but do you see that as a positive? Do you see that, hey, there's a fire in Michael Penix's belly, this is part of the whole leadership stuff? You know, how do you interpret it?
Yeah, let's be very clear. I don't think Mike needs to fight for me to think that he's not a competitor or that he is competitive. You know, like I don't need to see that from him to know his competitive spirit. Even though we talk about how cool, calm, and collected his demeanor is and all these things, you understand how competitive Mike is in just by getting to know him. And then, of course, the competitor that you see on the football field, or at least the glimpses that we have at the NFL level. However, when you see your quarterback take it to that next level, I'm telling you, ask any football player, that is your leader. That is your alpha on both sides of the ball. They look at the quarterback. What is he doing? How does he lead? What's his body language like? What does he do in and out of the huddle? All of the focus and attention is on what I believe to be the most important position in all of sports. And when you have somebody with that kind of caliber and pressure already on your shoulders, and you take it to a next level and you show your guys, I ain't scared, I think that unlocks something different in a team. I really do. There is an art and a science to this. And if you ask any football player, they'll tell you the same thing. It's why Caden Ellis, when we were talking to him afterwards, he didn't see it, but he heard it from his teammates that Mike was involved in a fight. And he was like, oh, that's my quarterback. QB1, baby. I love you, Mike. And so that, I think, is going to do something really special for this team. I don't think that it guarantees you a Lombardi trophy. I don't think that it guarantees you a deep run in the playoffs. However, there is something to that whenever you do witness the most important player on the field go that extra mile and show that he has fire and he's not scared. His words exactly. He said, I think they just viewed me as just a quarterback, and I'm not like that.
We've all been there, logging on early and waiting forever for concert tickets to go on sale, only to lose your spot for a show you've been dying to see. Live music should be about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping. That's where Game Time comes in. Game Time makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop as it gets closer to showtime, and you can save up to 60% with their killer last-minute deals. Tired of endlessly scrolling, trying to find the best deal? Well, Game Time's zone deals pick the best seats in your section for you. And with Game Time, the price you see is the price you pay. No hidden fees. Take the guesswork out of buying concert tickets and show tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, the lowest price guaranteed.
Today's joint practice against the Los Angeles Rams might be the most impactful proving ground for the New Orleans Saints quarterback competition.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast.
I think this could be the most important day for the New Orleans Saints quarterbacks when it comes to this quarterback competition. Spencer Rattler, Tyler Shuck, both have shown good things. Both have shown some things I'm sure that they would like back. But really, it's the adversity and managing the adversity that's most important. And they're sure to see adversity and also have an opportunity to bounce back from adversity over the course of this one-day joint practice with the Los Angeles Rams. So let's break it down for each of these quarterbacks. We'll start off with Spencer Rattler, who I think is still in the lead when it comes to quarterback competition and certainly would like to expand that lead quite a bit across against Tyler Shuck, because he'll have to in order to earn that week one role. I think the biggest thing for him is going to be bouncing back from not really the last 2 days, because again, on Wednesday, he had a strong day, completed 15 of his 20 passes, threw a pair of touchdowns, including one that went for like a lateral touchdown and all those other things that would count as a touchdown. But each of the end of the last 2 practices, he's led this long double-digit play drive, and then in situations that aren't really within his control, ended up with interceptions by the end of it, which isn't to say that he had bad practices. Like I said, strong practices in both of those showings, especially the one on Wednesday, but not necessarily the punctuation that you'd like to have, which isn't the same as having a punctuation you don't want to have, but not getting the punctuation that you'd like to have on each of those last 2 days. Today gave Spencer Rattler an opportunity to be able to punctuate as much as he wants when it comes to, or as much as he can when it comes to what should be a pivotal day in this quarterback competition. The interception that ended his day by Julian Blackmon on Wednesday was on a throw it up situation with 2 seconds left on the clock on a third down by a touchdown scenario. So you just put the ball up in the end zone, hope somebody goes out there and makes a play on it, hope it's not a defensive guy. Unfortunately, it was a defensive guy, not on Spencer Rattler. Then you go to the day before that on Tuesday, a very well-placed pass to Dante Pettis. Ball goes off the hands of Dante Pettis, tips up in the air, and then Julian Blackmon ends up with it. So 2 straight days, you saw double-digit play drives into the red zone that end up landing on, not so advantageous situations into the defense's hands. And so now you get a chance, if you're Spencer Rattler, to kind of show up and punctuate, because there's no reason he should lose confidence after those 2 interceptions. But I wouldn't blame him if he was a little annoyed. You know what I mean? Like walking into this Rams practice going, I really didn't want my day to end that way. And due to the circumstances, it did. Now I'm going to make sure that this day doesn't even have a chance to end that way. And so I look to see if he will be able to kind of take the reins and kind of own the day, seize the day, if you will, in that situation. Over on the Tyler Shuck side of it all, it's really just about continuing the momentum. He's had really good momentum since the Saints switched over to a little bit more scrimmage live call type situations. And he had a pretty strong day in the preseason game as well, minus the welcome to the NFL pick 6. If I'm not holding any of those interceptions against those guys, then you see strong days from all of them and an opportunity to bounce back and do so with 2 key factors. Going up against a pretty good defense that's going to bring you a pretty good pass rush. That's number 1. But also number 2, actually getting opportunities with the first team offense. This was something that I talked about in yesterday's live show that I want to go back to real quick in case you didn't catch that show. And even if you did catch it, I think it's worth being reminded of going into whatever reporting is going to come out of this joint practice today, that the things that you hear coming out of these joint practice should end up holding and carrying some weight. And we'll tell you if it doesn't, but should end up holding some weight. And this is coming from a guy that really, honestly, I'm not a big fan of joint practices, period. I don't think that teams actually get out of it what they say that they got out of it. I don't buy it. I think that there's things that you can do within your own organization that allow you to be able to control the situation a bit more. Joint practice, to me, is just a risk. But when you have a quarterback competition, it gives you a lot of added value. When you have new players on the offensive line, there's a lot of value. When you have new coaching, there's a lot of value. That's why we're focusing on all that on today's show. But this opportunity for Spencer Rattler, for Tyler Shuck, for the both of them, is one that is unique. When you go in and you're the starter in a preseason game and you're playing with other first team players, you're not always playing with other starters. No Chris Olave, no Alvin Kamara, no Rashid Shaheed to start that game against the Chargers. Best believe that if Tyler Shuck is starting the game Sunday against Jacksonville, he ain't getting those guys either. You know what I mean? And if he does, it's for a very, very brief amount of time. And so these joint practices give both of these guys a little bit more of a fair shot to actually have a first team around them, have the starters around them. Kellen Moore said that the workload is going to be pretty heavy for the first team guys. That's why I don't expect a lot of those first team guys to see snaps, or at least not many snaps, going into Sunday's game against Jacksonville with that preseason game, which stinks for fans, right? Because you don't get to come and see anything during the Rams and Saints joint practice. The Rams are hosting this joint practice. Their practices are closed, and so therefore this is closed as well. And if the Saints were hosting these Irvine, California practices, they have been closed. And so because of that, they would have also been closed to the public. So you kind of lose your chance as a fan to get an early look at the starting lineup. But this is going to be really valuable for these two quarterbacks, that they actually get to take snaps with the guys that they're expected to take snaps with week 1 of the 2025 season, which Spencer Rattler in live game situations has not done yet, right? Tyler Shuck coming in as a rookie has not done yet. And so being able to do this and go into these joint practices, go up against another team, a good team at that, probably one of my favorites in terms of like Super Bowl favorites or playoff favorites, probably one of the favorites going into the 2025 season in the NFC. And so now you get a chance to go up against those guys with the other players that you're actually going to take snaps with in 2025. So this is a major opportunity for both of these quarterbacks to show what it is that they could do with a full complement in a way that they haven't been able to do that. Now it's a full-ish complement, right? They won't have Trevor Penning, but they're going to have the starting wide receivers. They're going to have Juwan Johnson, their top tight end, along with Jack Stoll. They're going to have the majority of their starting offensive line. They're going to have Alvin Kamara. All of that makes a big difference. And so I'm really, really intrigued to see how these two quarterbacks handle that situation, having all the weapons and going up against a unfamiliar competition, while also being in what has become a very familiar and friendly competition between Spencer Rattler and Tyler Shuck. I think today could be the most important day, could wind up being the most important day in this quarterback battle by the time that it's all said and done.